Okay, guys, so there are two ways that you can really adapt the way that your camera looks at someone, or sorry, your film looks within iMovie. First is color treatment. When you select a film, remember that you have all these options up here at the top. We've talked a little bit already about cropping. We've talked a little bit about retiming your film, slowing down, speeding it up from the dance movie. We're going to take a look at two other buttons this time around. One of them is the one that looks like a color palette here, like one of the paint palettes. And that allows you to manipulate two things. One of them is called white balance, which determines how or what your camera considers to be white. So if you manipulate that, notice it can make it brighter or darker depending upon how you stretch and shift that. So this is one way that if you want to make something look like it's much more night, this is one way to do that without actually being in the dark. Typically, night shots are very, very rarely actually done at night. Why? Because it's impossible to see. Whenever you see it on movies, for the most part, it's a result of filtering in some way. Usually upping it to blue, upping the color to blue. So if you ever noticed, most movie shots or TV shows, if they're at night, things look really blue. Why? Because it's not really night. They're lying to you. I know. TV lies. Your worlds are shattered. I understand. So brightness or paleness is a result of this slider. But notice you can move any of the dots. And each of the dots has some fine controls there, depending upon your effect. For the most part, this is all about contrast. How white are your whites, how dark are your darks. The more you push it, the more contrasting your film will look. Second slider is color. So I can push it into the blues if I really want to, or I can push it much more into the darks, or much more into the reds and yellows, depending upon how you want to do it. So here, if I want to make it look more like night, this is probably what I would do. Turn it into blue, turn down the contrast so things are a little bit darker, and then you have kind of a night scene. So one slider does basics of color, the other one does something called warmth and coolness. That does a little bit more extreme version of the color, but it only really pushes things into the paler colors or into the more intense colors. So one of this is just colors, one of this is just intensity of that color. Does that make sense, guys? Play around with the sliders for a second. I'll give you guys a few, like a minute or two to play around with that, and then I'll show you the next thing. Second way that you can manipulate the look of a film is this second to last button, this one that looks like three circles intersecting. And this is your filtering button. So there are two things here. One, there are audio effects that you can change how things sound. We're not going to play much with this, but just be aware that you can filter sound. If you want someone to sound like they're, I'm trying to think, like a robot, that's an option. We won't be using that too much, but you might want to use that for certain effects. The one that we're going to use much more is clip filtering, and you might be familiar with this if you use any kind of Snapchat or other kind of photo taking option on your phone. This allows you to do very different effects to your film. So while one manipulates colors, these usually get very, very specific effects, such as, for instance, oh my God, computer, why are you dying? Here's the fun thing. I don't know if it's recording right now. Oh, it totally is. And it's just watching me freeze. Let's view this so that's on the recording now that it's hopefully not as frozen. So again, we have color manipulation over here, but again, we have filters on the side that go for specific effects. So some of these can be combined. Again, things like flipped, for instance, can be. It is important to note that you can't stack filters, unfortunately. So if you need things flipped and a different color, you're going to have to use a different technique to do that. But think about the way that you might, for instance, use a filter to reinforce a feeling in your film. So for instance, I might use where's the dream one? The dream filter to reinforce the feelings behind my own film so that it's regular. So that reinforces the mood behind this where it's supposed to be awesome when I walk through the hallway. So keep in mind you can do that. Last important note, sometimes you'll have situations where you want things to look the same. So for instance, we look over here at this clip, you'll notice that Jasmine's hand is much darker in this part of the film than it is in here. She's much paler because of the way that I treated the color. If you want things to match, if you've done a lot of work on one part of the film and you're like, I want that for everything, the thing you want to do is something called match color. So if I click the film, I hit the match color underneath the first button here. I can then skim to Jasmine's part and notice it'll balance it out so it looks like it's the same color treatment. So in this case, notice her hand now looks pretty similar to what it looks like here. Questions, comments, confusions? Okay, you only have a few minutes. In Edmodo, I want you to start thinking about what colors you want to use and what treatments you might want to use in your own film to reinforce the moods that you're going for. We'll continue filming tomorrow.